You ready to do this, Matt?
Yes, sir. Punch it, Chewie.
Welcome, super friends, to the Fortress of Nerditude podcast, a safe place to talk about all things in nerd and pop culture. I'm Spencer Stapleton, and my co-pilot is Matt Shaw. We're two nerds that just refuse to grow up. Thank you for joining us. This is episode 165. We release every Thursday morning. You can find us on our website, fortofnerd.com. We have links to iTunes, Google Music, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, basically anywhere podcasts are available. Stop by, relax a while. If you like what you're hearing, hit that subscribe button and get us automatically each and every week in your ear holes. Matt, it's another week. How are you?
It is another week, and I am really doing well.
Yeah, man, what's going on?
I'm happy. I'm healthy. The kids are happy and healthy, and that's what's going good.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Are you living on the air in Cincinnati?
Always.
Cincinnati, WKRP?
Oh, gosh.
That's songs in my head. I don't know why.
Anyway, no, it was a good week. We talked about this a while ago. So I started getting disciplined probably 2 weeks ago with diet and exercise, trying to, I don't know, get back into it, because having the kids and getting married and all that, it just, I wasn't at a place where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And so I started doing that. Had some good results. Was really trying to keep things in check. And so far, so good. And I will swear by Ring Fit Adventure for Nintendo Switch. People can laugh at it, or it does look weird. But man, it's a fun way to exercise.
Really?
And you don't have to leave. You just go. Emmy watches me play it. She grabs anything that's circular that looks like the ring that I'm holding, and she does all the exercises with me, and you get a good workout. And it has, it's great. So that was a focus for me, this last week, of trying to be smart with what I'm eating and how much I'm eating of the things that I'm eating, and exercising. So it was.
So let me ask you this: Are you trying to do any sort of diet, or are you just trying to restrict calories? Are you trying to stay to certain food groups? What are you
just
doing
calories?
Dietary?
I'm just trying to keep it below 2,000 calories.
Okay.
I'm not trying to lose weight fast, because I don't feel that I'm in that position. I'm not extremely overweight to the point where I'm it's hard to get around, and I'm unable to do the things that I want to do. I'm just at a place where I'm not sexy anymore.
Oh, Matt, come on. Don't sell yourself short.
And I want to be. Oh, come on now. And so for me, it was just these are the healthy foods that I know I should be eating more of, and these are the things I should stop eating, and this is the kind of breakfast I should be having. So I'm not even necessarily counting all of the calories. I'm just being smarter with what I'm eating, and my snacks are, celery and peanut butter or string cheese. So I'm not, only eating kale chips and crap like that. I'm still eating things that are decent to eat, just being more careful about what it is and how much it is, and saying no to the little things like certain salad dressings and stuff like that, and then making sure that I'm disciplined in exercising or playing basketball or whatever it is, and kind of getting out of a rut.
Yeah, man, I hear that. I've actually started eating healthier again, about 3, almost going on 4 weeks ago now.
Yeah, boy.
I cut the sugar back out.
Nice.
I was just I'm done. So, a quick history lesson here. 2018, actually Christmas of 2017, I said I was done and I was going to take charge of my life. and I wanted to get healthy again for my family, for my boys. And in 2018, I dropped 127 pounds.
He did. I saw it.
Yeah, eating healthy, exercising, like I felt great. Then in 2019, like the first part of it was just like a little rocky. We had a big vacation and then the cruise, and it was hard to get exercise and it was hard to eat healthy. And then I came back and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, that. And then I started getting busier and busier with work and then the office move. And pretty soon, like, I was just so slammed in my life that I wasn't making time for anything. And so I wasn't exercising. And then pretty soon I stopped eating healthy and slipped into bad habits. And then I put a bunch of weight back on. I definitely didn't put all of it back on. Nowhere near that. But I mean, I definitely put a lot of weight back on. And I can tell you, like, to do so well one year and the next year, like, backslide so much, it's depressing. And, like, it just felt like I felt down and I felt bad and I was beating myself up about it. And, like, right around Christmas time, I was like, I got to stop this. Like, I got to stop this self-destructive thinking, this self-destructive behavior, and go back to what was making me happy and, like, thinking about my kids. So anyway, long story, now that we're caught up on the history. Cut sugar out about 4 weeks ago, and the first 2 weeks were hard, but then, like, I don't have sugar cravings anymore. Mm-hmm. And I started eating healthy, and just a little over a week ago, I started trying to get out and walk more, or walk on the treadmill because it's, freezing cold here. Yeah. And in the last 8 days, I've dropped 9 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm back, baby. I am on the hype train. I am working at this thing. We've got our Hawaii trip coming up, and I want to drop as much as I can before then. Yeah. I have kind of like a mini goal that I'm shooting for, which could be reasonable as long as I can keep at it. And then I'm trying to drop a considerable amount more by May, when I'm going to head to Nashville for a meetup with some friends. And then by next year, this time, when Brita and I and the kids are going to be taking a trip together, I want to be back to where I was, if not lower than where I was. And for me, it's not, like you said, Matt, it's not necessarily about, like, the weight and the number, but it's about feeling, like, sexy. It's about feeling healthy. It's about feeling like I've got energy to chase around the boys and to do things. Like, there's just honest to goodness things that I want to do in this life that getting overweight has prevented me from doing, and I'm not going to let that happen ever again. Yeah. So
I love it.
Man, I'm glad, man, you and I are both kind of kicking 2020 in the rear end and taking charge. This is awesome.
Yeah, man. Just trying to get back into it, because I love exercising. Honestly, I know that that's weird, but I love it. I mean, I did it all the time back before we moved here to Texas, and the company I worked for, we go every day, and I was strong. I mean, I wasn't just like, I was strong. Yeah. And then, it's not as strong anymore. I can't lift the weight that I could lift, and that doesn't matter as much to me as I just want to just shed some of the pounds. So anyway, that was, but other than that, I'm trying to think back on the week, and it was a pretty chill, pretty normal week. We didn't do a whole lot of things. We had, a lot going on with the kids. Their sleep has been just terrible. So our sleep has been terrible, which makes for really long and really hard days and really stressful and anxiety-filled nights. So, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
But that was it. We did watch the movie Peanut Butter Falcon. I don't know if you've heard of that or
I've heard of it. I don't know much about it though, but I've heard good things.
So it's Shia's like comeback movie, kind of, from all of his rehab and therapy and stuff. I think it was the first movie he's done in a while, and it was really great.
Really?
Really great movie. So if you haven't seen Peanut Butter Falcon, it's a fun movie. It's really good. Shia LaBeouf has always been one of my favorite actors, and hard to see him struggle, but good to see him kind of healthy now, emotionally.
Welcome back, Shia LaBeouf.
Welcome back, Shia. We love you. We always will. So anyway, that was that. How was your week?
My week was good. Kids were a little unruly over the weekend. just being kids. Like nothing bad, but just like
Sure.
it seemed like they were trying our patience more than usual for some reason. But the work week was real good. Oh, so I streamed a whole bunch last week, and gosh, it feels like forever ago. But like I streamed on Tuesday of last week, so like right after we recorded, I streamed DJ Hero, and that like I intended to stream for like maybe that for like half an hour, then switch to something else. Streamed that for like 2.5 hours, almost 3 hours maybe. Just loving that. So that may be my Tuesday night game for a while. It may be Tuesday Tunes or something like that.
Nice.
But I did that, and then I switched over and I played the first episode of The Wolf Among Us on Wednesday.
Okay.
I have played that game before. It's a lot of fun. Cool story. It's very mature, though. I forgot how much language was in that first episode. And then Thursday night and Friday night... No, Thursday night was The Witcher 3. Friday night I pushed because I only had like 4 hours of sleep. And so then on Saturday I streamed, and I streamed some more of my Jedi Fallen Order pushing for the Platinum, which I played more of that over the weekend as well, and I'm real close on that. But, Super Friends, if you're listening, do me a favor, go over to twitch.tv, sstapleton79, drop me a follow, come hang out. Like, that's the cool thing about Twitch. If you've never been there or you don't know what it is, like, people play video games over there, people make crafts, people, just sometimes just chat. They'll do, workouts, whatever. But, like, the cool thing is, like, you can interact, like, you can be talking in chat with me, and I can be chatting back with you as I'm playing a video game or doing something. I've, done some cooking streams, and it's just kind of a cool, fun, interactive way to hang out. And if you click the little follow button, you get notified when I'm online. So you'll say, oh, hey, look, Spencer's making ribs tonight. Let's go find out his rib recipe, and we'll chat with him and have a good time.
Nice.
So yeah, doing that, having a lot of fun. I'm really trying to make sure I'm consistent with that more in 2020 than I was in 2019. Kind of getting my feet wet in 2019, figuring it out, and just trying to have a good time in 2020. Other than that, man, it was my nephew Jake turned 3, and so we went to a birthday party for a 3-year-old, which is exactly like you would imagine. It's just a lot of chaos and kids running around, but it was fun to see him turn 3. Other than that, that's about it. Like, it was kind of a normal-ish week, nothing super crazy. Yeah. We've got just a little over a month until we take this Hawaii vacation. So that's coming up, and you and I are going to have to do some planning ahead of time to figure out how to make this all work for the podcast.
In Hawaii, sorry.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't even know how we do that time-wise, time difference. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll have to figure that out. But so that's what I got going on in my week. My week's been good. I'm happy. Loving life.
Okay, good. Me too.
So, I'm happy. You're happy. You know what else makes me happy, Matt?
Killing Bothans.
That always makes me happy. How should we kill the Bothans this week?
Just remove all water and watch them slowly shrivel away. That's what I say we do.
I always have to let you know, many Bothans died to bring us this information.
Rest in peace, you Bothans.
All right, Matt, we're into Rebel Intelligence. There are dehydrated Bothans all around us now.
It's been weeks, guys.
That was a long, torturous process. What do you have for me this week, Matt?
All right, so first off, let's start with some cool Star Wars news.
Cool,
potentially awful, I guess, depending on who you are, though I don't think anybody would think this would be awful. So we're hearing reports that Taika Waititi may be developing a Star Wars movie, and that's where the news ends.
Yes.
So I read that and I was like, this is fantastic news. How could this be in any way bad? I mean, I think he would probably have to make some tonal changes just a little bit depending on what you're looking for. I don't know. If you look at some of his other projects outside of what we know from like Marvel and some of his recent interactions, I think he did, if I'm not mistaken, he did Hunt for the Wilder People, which was a really, really, really fun movie that was a little more serious, that had some other tones to it. So I think he could be a really cool...
Didn't he also direct the finale of The Mandalorian?
He did.
Episode 8?
Yeah, so we know that he can do something other than the crazy, silly, fun...
buddy cop feel. Yeah.
Right. Of what we all know him to do, right? When we hear that name, we kind of associate it now with Marvel.
Sure.
And he's done so many other things, still has that flair for comedy and that kind of quirkiness of the comedy too. Not a, slap you in the face, this is supposed to be funny, but it's a witty, smart humor. And I'm really excited at the potential, at the prospect of maybe this happening.
So think about this for a second. In Thor Ragnarok, which he directed, he really tapped into like Korg.
Yeah.
And what's his name? Korg and Meek. And like really like found a way to make those like kind of smaller side characters really funny, like great comedic relief. Isn't that what C-3PO and R2-D2 were in the original trilogy and in some of the prequels and the sequels? But like, so I look at that and I say, okay, he was able to like write big action, heavy dialogue stuff for, Thor and Banner and whatnot, but he was also able to write like the comedy. So I think I'm really excited by this. I'm just really excited because I think he has the potential to write a cool Star Wars movie, direct it, but like the ability to like inject humor, because I think we've gotten away from some of the humor of the original trilogy that like made it endearing, right? Like some of the, like the little things that the Ewoks did in Return of the Jedi. Yeah, a little sugary, sweet, kind of,
right.
Goofy. But some of it was just like honest to goodness, like fun. Like when the Ewoks jump on the speeder bike and all of a sudden they take off and like they almost like, it's just silly. It's kind of like a little light moment. I think Taika Waititi can do that perfectly.
I agree. And that's one of the problems I kind of had with the sequels, is not that they weren't funny, but they weren't the way that I wanted them to be funny. They were like almost irreverently funny, and I was like, oh. The funniest part for me from the sequels is Han Solo's line about "that's not how the Force works."
Right.
That's a great line. Will be one of the great Star Wars lines of all time for me. But then there's some stuff like at the beginning of The Last Jedi, and everybody knows how I feel about The Last Jedi. I hate that stuff where Poe's like messing with them, with General Hux, and talking about his mom, and like he's tooling with you. And I'm like, no, this doesn't feel very Star Warsy.
Right. Yeah. Like, that felt more internet trolly.
It's kind of funny, but it's not this right funny. So I agree. I think Taika Waititi can bring the right kind of comedy. He's such a great writer, such a great director. I hope this is true. I hope it's true. I hope he and Kevin Feige have gotten together and like mapped out a trilogy that they're going to work on. That would be sick. I
probably tend to think you're probably onto something there.
I hope that. Anyway.
Yep.
High hopes.
Yep.
High hopes.
High hopes indeed, my friend. I'm with you on there. Okay, so I got something that I thought this was really, really cool. So we talked about this a little bit ago. The Witcher, the series on Netflix. Remember, we said it's super popular and it was doing like crazy numbers, and it was predicted that it was higher than The Mandalorian and like the highest, show for Netflix for the year or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And we kind of questioned that. Peter Christensen actually came in with some really good points to consider. And after I went, okay, maybe. So here's what I found out this week. Because The Witcher is so popular on Netflix, a few things have happened. One, the original books are being issued a reprint of 500,000 books. That's actual physical books, 500,000 books. Now, maybe that doesn't like appeal to a lot of people, but for me, because I've actually gone out and bought the books, I got them on Audible, but I like this. I like this when stuff like this happens. And we'll get to some of this other stuff later in the podcast, which kind of dovetails into this idea a little bit, but I love it when a medium like TV, streaming, movies picks up and does something that's an adaptation from a book and does it so well that like people just are craving more, and then they go back to the original source material.
Right.
I've said it before, but like there's just part of me that loves it when I'm like, I've loved something for so long. Like, for instance, Game of Thrones, right? When Game of Thrones came out, like, I'd read those books and I loved those books. And all of a sudden everyone's talking about Game of Thrones, and then people are going back out and wanting to buy the books and know what the differences are and read it. And all of a sudden, like, my circle of influence, the people that I'm talking to on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, whatever, those conversations started creeping in, and then they would always inevitably say to me, "Oh, you've read those, right? You know what it is." I'm like, oh, yes, my nerd info is ready. Yeah. I know things. Are you ready? You know, that sort of thing. Like, I get giddy and excited. So really looking forward to the book sales. I haven't read the books, but I'm going to. Like I said, I picked it up on Audible because of this series. So that's happened. Something else has happened too. The Witcher, the book series obviously inspired the video games. Well, The Witcher 3, when it first came out, it had on Steam something like 92,000 players concurrently at the same time back in 2014 when it launched.
Yeah.
Well, now, because of the TV streaming Netflix series, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt set a new record on Steam by having over 100,000 concurrent players. It's driving people back to play the games.
Huh.
I'm playing the game, and I started before the series only because I've just never had the ability to get around to it, and I've always wanted to.
Yeah.
But it set a record 6 years after its launch with concurrent players just based on the Netflix series.
That's crazy.
I think it's crazy. I think this has now the potential of being like the next Game of Thrones-esque level type of thing, because so many people want to get into this, and we're going to get a second season, we know. And if so many more people are going to watch the second season, and people playing the game and people reading the books, that conversation, we're going to see news articles about, you know, how anticipation for the second season and like, it's going to drive more people to it. It's going to be the Game of Thrones effect. The first season was really good, and people started talking about it, and then everyone's like, well, I don't want to miss out. And so when the second season came around, like, just people poured into it. I think we're going to get the same thing with The Witcher, and I'm okay with that.
It sounds good to me. I still need to get into that. Speaking of which,
get the game. It's good. It's on Switch now.
I mean, it is.
I'd get it on your PS4 if I were you, but it'd look better.
Oh, one of these days I'll get around to it. So, speaking of something thriving, let's talk about something dying.
Ooh.
Yes, death comes to us all. So, The Dark Tower, which was a very popular, fantastic book, I believe it was a series, has had that movie adaptation, I think, in 2017. And it was a complete and total disaster.
Yeah, I heard it was a garbage dump.
Just nobody liked it. And Amazon was thinking about doing a series on The Dark Tower because there was this kind of buzz around it, and they were making a move, and they're like, let's do it. And now it's canceled. Here we are in 2020. They canceled it. So we talked about what good things can happen. And then what bad things can happen. And from what I understand, I'm trying to think way back to 2017. Because it said, like, what's his name in that movie?
Idris Elba.
Idris Elba. He was, I mean...
And
it wasn't
Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, these are not nobodies.
Right.
And for a film to still suck... From what I recall from kind of reading the reviews, this did the opposite of of what kind of The Witcher did, which was The Witcher was just staying true to the book series and the source material. This did not, from what I understand.
Yeah, I heard
stay
that.
very true to the source material. So don't take too many liberties unless you're positive that's going to work out, or it'll blow up in your face as the Dark Tower has blown up. So no more.
I haven't read the Dark Tower series. I know a lot of people who love it. It's like Stephen King's attempt of writing something other than like kind of horror.
Right.
And the first book I think is called The Gunslinger. And I read maybe like a couple of chapters and I was just bored to tears. Like just bored with it. And I had it on Audible and I just returned it. I was like, nope.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't. And
Yeah.
I picked up something else that I actually really enjoyed. I think I picked up Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman at the time. But yeah, I like the idea of this, and I was actually excited for an Amazon series because I don't know that I'm going to go and read the book series, because if books are slow in parts, you write the screenplay, you can kind of skip over some of that.
Right.
You know, find quicker ways to get through a chapter that's all exposition about, you know, the hills and the forests and the trees and the deserts and whatever.
Yeah.
So, R.I.P. Dark Tower.
R.I.P. Dark Tower series. Sorry.
All right, Matt, I got a little more death for you.
Oh, dear.
This is bigger than the Dark Tower death here.
Oh, no.
You remember a little while ago when Disney acquired Fox for like a gajillion bazillion dollars?
I certainly remember.
Yeah. And we've talked about all the good things that we're looking forward to, right?
Oh, yeah.
Simpsons got brought over. We're going to get X-Men and Fantastic Four in the MCU.
Yes.
So, this last week, Disney's announced that it is actually doing some rebranding. And 20th Century Fox and Fox Searchlight Pictures are no more. They're going to be rebranded as 20th Century Studios and Searchlight Pictures. Now, this probably, from a corporate standpoint, makes a lot of sense because the Fox News division was not part of this deal. Fox Sports was not part of this deal. And so, like, that's still going to have, like, the Fox name. So if you kept it 20th Century Fox and Fox Searchlight Pictures, it's confusing. There's going to be some brand confusion there. So what they did say, though, is that current pictures under 20th Century Fox and Fox Searchlight Pictures will continue to be released, those that have been done. However, starting with some newer movies that are coming out here, I think as early as like February, they're now going to come out with the new branding, 20th Century Studios and Searchlight Pictures. So Fox, 20th Century Fox, I think has been around since like the 1930s. It's been around a long time.
Yeah.
But Disney owns it now. I'm glad that they still kept 20th Century and went 20th Century Studios instead of like 20th Century Disney.
Yeah.
Or Disney Searchlight Pictures. I'm glad they didn't do that.
Yep. And it makes sense not to. When you attach the word Disney to something, there's an image that comes to your mind.
Right.
And some of the pictures made by 20th Century Fox and Searchlight Pictures don't match with the Disney brand, so to speak.
Well, it's if you remember, you go back, like Disney never did a rated R movie.
Right.
And then they spun off Touchstone Pictures, and Touchstone Pictures would.
Yeah.
And so like that was like it's still owned by Disney, but it's a kind of a different brand that they could put out some more adult, more mature themed content. And I think this is a good way of changing things around a little bit, getting rid of brand confusion, but still giving them an opportunity to like say like, hey, we can put stuff under the 20th Century Studios brand or the Searchlight Pictures brand, and we don't have to give it that Disney name, because then people are going to think, oh, princesses and Mickey Mouse and wholesome family entertainment. So if they do decide to do a Deadpool 3 and keep it rated R, it can go under, 20th Century Studios.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to have the Disney name attached to it.
Right.
Just as a what if. Like, I don't know what's going to actually happen. But anyway, that's kind of an end of an era. I mean, it's a long time.
It is. It's a long time. It's inevitable. Blah,
it's
blah, blah,
business-wise,
blah,
it's the right move. I get
This is
that.
what has to happen and all that stuff. So not too surprising for any of us, I'm sure. All right, so I'll move on to kind of not rebranding, but a company pivoting.
Okay.
And let's talk about NBC's Peacock streaming service, which you hate the name Peacock.
Oh, it's so bad.
Lots
It's
of
just
people hate the name
so
Peacock.
bad.
I don't really care either way. I
mean, don't get me wrong. Like, at the end of the day, the service is
we'll
the
get
service.
used to it, I guess. But
just like, I mean, come on. Like, okay, I'm sorry. No, I'm getting on the soapbox, Matt. Apple Plus, Disney Plus, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime Video. Like, nothing sounds so weird as like, let's use the nickname
right
of the logo that we use. I mean, it's not like they didn't call that Disney Plus streaming service Mouse Ears.
Right.
Come on.
Right.
Who's going to want us? Hey kids, let's go watch Mouse Ears to stream video. Like
it's stupid.
It's dumb. Peacock.
I hear you. Anyway, so we got more news on Peacock though.
Rebrand that crap.
Of how you
rebrand
feel.
that crap, NBC. Okay.
It's not going to happen, man. They've doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on this. So there's actually quite a bit of information that they dumped out, and there's still a lot of information, a lot of questions that I personally have, because after this informational dump, I got more interested in what they're offering. Because to me, it was like, look, and maybe I don't understand CBS All Access, but CBS All Access doesn't have anything for me. I don't watch any of their shows on CBS. In fact, I don't know the last time I turned on CBS other than to watch like March Madness, maybe an NFL game. CBS is not like my network.
I'll get you to watch Star Trek Discovery
Survivor or
and Picard. Yeah.
Okay. Potentially, I could get into do a Star Trek series. We'll see. Yeah. So I don't know what they're doing over there, though. Honestly, I don't know if they have originals. I don't know if they have movies on there. I don't know what CBS All Access really is. So I thought this was going to be something similar, this NBC, where they were just going to find a place where you could find things that were airing on NBC. But this is different. So what they did announce is that this is free to everyone. You get the tier 1, which is kind of their basic package, ad supported for free.
Okay.
And then there's a second tier where there's like double the content or something like that. And they haven't released what exactly that content is going to be. That's $5 a month or free if you are a Comcast subscriber.
Okay.
Then you've got tier 3, which is like the pro version, which is ad free for an extra $5. So it's probably $5 if you have Comcast and $10 if you don't. So certainly very competitively priced in the fact that it's free, or it's at most $10 a month, which that's a deal. So what's interesting is I was looking at some of their programming and they have hammered down on original stuff. They have like original things from like Tina Fey, original shows from Jimmy Fallon. I know that I may be the only person who cares about this. I'm obviously not. They're continuing my favorite show of the year. AP Bio is being moved over to that service, and they're continuing original content. So it's not just, hey, here's a couple of shows that you can watch. This is stuff. There's movies they're making.
What do you think, though, is the big seller? Like, what do you think's the big get for them that they're going to have on their service?
Well, we know that they're getting The Office.
Yep.
And the top 3 shows they said streaming on Netflix, it was Friends, The Office, and Parks and Rec. And all 3 of those are leaving Netflix, and 2 of them are on Peacock. Parks and Rec and The Office are going to be on Peacock exclusively. And Friends is going over to HBO Max. Regardless of what the title of this article says that I'm looking at, I looked it up extensively today. It's going to HBO Max.
Yeah.
I looked it up like 8 times today because the title of this article is driving me nuts. And I was like, no, because I like Friends. I need to know where Friends is going to be because it's nowhere right now because the deal with Netflix is over and it's not streaming till May, which is when HBO Max comes out. It's very confusing. Supposedly, that's what's going to happen, that they claim to have the exclusive rights to Friends. However, interestingly, just more streaming stuff. Netflix just signed a deal for Seinfeld. So that's an NBC property that will not be part of the NBCU kind of Peacock network. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that Friday Night Lights will be streaming exclusively on Peacock, they announced, along with Psych, which is currently on Prime, Psych the Movie 2, which will be premiering on that service. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that they're trying to get people real excited about. Then they're going to have 600 movies in year one. Jurassic Park movies will be on there. E.T.'s going to be on there. So some of these big movies. So they're really trying to be competitive with like
a lot of
Disney
the Universal
Plus.
stuff, yeah.
And airing kind of the old programming, the new programming, next day streaming of content. So they're trying to compete with Hulu. And if you watch NBC, which is pretty much exclusively what I watch, which is why this is interesting to me. I don't watch anything that's not on NBC except The Bachelor. And so for me, this is super attractive for me to say, I'm going to ditch Hulu. I don't need Hulu anymore. Because everything I watch on Hulu is going to be on NBC's streaming platform in a hot minute. So this is more attractive to me, and I'm paying about the same. And I'm getting access to way more movies, way more original content. So anyway, it's interesting. I got more. I'm going to get off my NBC soapbox because that's my network.
Yeah, so I think I'll try out the free version, and here's the only reason why. Because I'm getting a little... I mean, I don't know. I'm getting a little tired of like that. We're going to fracture this. We're going to like pretty soon, like, I don't know. We're going to start seeing like everything's going to have a streaming service. Yeah. And if you want this content and that content, it's under this, paywall and behind that paywall. Friends was the big thing. I remember when we first announced this and we talked about it, they're like, Friends is moving over. We're going to have Friends. Friends is leaving Netflix. And I knew so many people were freaking out saying, like, I've got to have Friends. I got to have Friends.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy Friends. I find it to be mildly funny.
Right.
I tried rewatching it maybe a year or two ago, and I watched like 7 seasons of it. So this isn't like I just watched a few episodes.
Right. Yeah,
I watched 7 seasons of it, and I just went like, yeah... There's so many better, funnier shows that I'd rather watch. So for me, that's not a big get. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of this stuff, I'm kind of like, The Office. I love The Office. Love it to death. But I have it all on DVD.
Right.
And so if it's not streaming somewhere, I still have it. I don't have to go and pay a streaming service. The one that hurts, Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
That one hurts. About every 2-3 years, I go back and I rewatch that whole series because it's one of my absolute favorites. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that one...
It's a thing because I'm with you on this because my favorite show, probably my second favorite maybe show of all time is Friday Night Lights.
Yeah.
And that I was used to that streaming on Netflix. And when I saw that was going away, I bought it. So I have Friday Night Lights on DVD, but the power it takes for me to get off of my couch to push open on my DVD player and put a disc in, we live in an era where that is a pain in the butt for me.
See,
and
this is
pick, especially with The Office. You got to pick which episode you want to watch, and you got to know which season it's on, and you got to put in the right disc. Because I don't watch like The Office. I don't watch it start to finish anymore. I pick and choose which episodes I want to watch when I want to watch them. Same with Parks and Rec.
This is where taking those DVDs, ripping them,
right,
and having your own Plex server is genius. Which I do have a Plex server, and I do this because then I can literally say like, here I ripped all of The Office. I've got it on my Plex server. I can queue it up. I can choose which season. I can choose episodes, or I can do start to finish at any given time. If I had Friday Night Lights on DVD, that's what I would do. Because then you don't have to get up off the couch. You don't have to go press a DVD. You just go, Plex, play episode 3 of season 4, and you're good to go.
Yeah, and the last thing we'll say about Peacock, which is another good thing about it, is even with the ad-supported version, they're claiming you're going to get under 5 minutes of ads in an hour of viewing.
Yeah, it's not bad.
So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I sit through way more ads on YouTube, I feel like. Anytime I watch a freaking YouTube video, it's just
YouTube's
driving
gotten
me
real
nuts.
bad.
I saw a 15-second unskippable ad, or like it was a 30-second ad, but I couldn't skip for 15 seconds.
Yep.
I was like, what happened? Anyway, neither here nor there. Peacock is coming your way in April if you're a Comcast subscriber, a special one, I don't know, and then July for the rest of us.
Okay. All right, I got one last thing here, Matt.
Right on.
National Treasure.
What a treasure he is.
Is a delightfully fun, silly movie. Mm-hmm. The fact that there's a treasure map on the back of the Declaration of Independence and Ben Franklin and the glasses and the... Mm-hmm. Anyway, it's fun. It's just a lot of fun. It's a Nick Cage vehicle. Like, you're not going to put anyone in that thing other than Nick Cage.
No.
The second one came out and it was, I don't know, weird. John Wilkes Booth diary, and there's a treasure hidden in like Mount Rushmore. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah. That's
not good. It's reported now Disney has greenlit National Treasure 3. They're going to bring back Jerry Bruckheimer. They're going to bring back Chris Bremner to write. And we don't know anything on casting. But you better believe that Nick Cage is going to be in this thing.
Are you kidding me? You'd have to be an idiot to try and make a National Treasure movie without Nicolas Cage. That's stupid.
Well, let's be honest. Nicolas Cage's career shot to high prominence in the mid-90s. Stayed there for quite a while. Then it dipped some. And then it came back with National Treasure and it jumped back up again. Yeah. And lately he's been making a lot of... he's made a lot of movies.
Kind of.
But his star dipped really low for a while.
Yeah. You ask a Gen Z who Nicolas Cage is, and they won't have any idea.
No
ask a high schooler, I don't know.
Yeah, you ask a Gen X like myself, Nicolas Cage was like, oh, The Rock, freaking Face Off, Con Air. He did 3 massive movies in 3 consecutive years. It was crazy. I don't see how he doesn't take this. This would be a huge, huge movie for him. Lots of people would see it. I don't know. I see this as a big win for Disney Plus. Ooh.
That would be a big get for Disney Plus. I don't know that that's where this goes. Eventually it will.
It'll hit theaters.
However, we'll see.
It'll make money in the theaters.
They should do a simultaneous release. That would be cool. I'm waiting for someone to do that.
Okay, so the only
of a big movie.
The only times you really see... So here's the problem. If you do a simultaneous release, you kill your box office intake.
Of course.
And what company is going to say, you know what? Just because, let's not make as much money as we could on this film. No, that's not going to happen. But what does happen, though, is a show like The Irishman, which is on Netflix.
Right.
They will release it in theaters, limited in LA for a week prior to it hitting Netflix, so it can be considered for Oscar awards season, stuff like that.
Right.
That's about as close to that as you're going to get.
As we're going to get. I know. But anyway, yeah, I hope Nick Cage comes back. I'd watch it if he's in it, as much as I really don't care for National Treasure, especially 2. I turned it off. I really didn't like it.
Well,
yeah, anyway. National
Treasure 3.
Moving on to something that could have been a treasure, in my opinion. But we're not going to... I don't know how much to say.
Okay, so here's the deal.
Things.
Okay, here's what I say, because I know this... You and I have talked about this.
Yeah.
I think the news of this released right after we recorded last week.
It did.
And we talked about it a few times this week, and I've read a bunch. It's worth mentioning... But I think we should be the consummate professionals that we are and never get biased.
Nope.
And I think we should talk about this, but not necessarily do the comparisons, not really deep dive into it. But we should talk about the things that are there.
So, Colin Trevorrow, who was originally supposed to do episode 9, allegedly his script has leaked.
Yes, it did.
And there have been many reports of this. This is being taken as gospel, right? Because Lucasfilm's not going to say anything. They're not going to be like, yep, that's the one. And Colin Trevorrow's not going to say it.
You know what really is going to help cement the fact that I think that this is actually an accurate leak? The visual... the art book,
visual
right?
dictionary.
Visual dictionary has artwork in that thing that is not from the movie, but from scenes that were leaked from this script.
Yep. So this script was going to, it had a code name. I don't know if it's a code name, if it was the final name, or if this is what it was going to be, but it was a working title of Star Wars Duel of the Fates.
We actually reported on that a couple of years ago because that name had been leaked as Colin Trevorrow's name.
Well, it's a better title than Rise of Skywalker.
Yes, it is.
Moving on. So there's some very interesting tidbits in here that are kind of more, I think, what I was expecting.
Okay.
Because we all know how it was with Rise of Skywalker. If you listen to the podcast, you certainly listened to that episode, and you know how I feel, you know how Spencer feels, and we feel pretty much the same on this film, Rise of Skywalker. So it was interesting because this version of Episode 9, it runs with what Last Jedi was, way more than what the Rise of Skywalker did, which was pretty much ignore it as if it didn't happen, except for the fact that Luke's dead. I mean, that's pretty much all that it kept. So this one has some interesting tidbits, like, at the end of at the end of Last Jedi, when Luke and Kylo Ren are battling, and he says, "If you strike me down, I will always be with you," right?
Yep.
This happens, and then in this script, this version of the script, Luke is haunting Kylo Ren. Mm-hmm. Taunting him almost, or helping him maybe. I don't know, but it uses the word haunt. So he's haunting him as Kylo Ren's going to Mustafar, and he's looking for what? A holocron. Not looking for a Sith Wayfinder, but a holocron.
Right.
And then it has some other interesting story beats that Rey really is a nobody.
Yep.
That she is not related to Palpatine. Palpatine never comes back. Palpatine is dead. There isn't a Palpatine. He's gone. There's another big bad that was above, that there was the message left for Darth Vader from Palpatine when he was going to die. And this message told Vader, who he assumed would still be alive, because I don't think even Palpatine knew that Vader would turn on him and throw him down the shaft. And we're going to the nitty gritty here, but that, there's somebody else, somebody higher, seek this other higher thing. And so then you've got Kylo Ren trying to seek this higher thing. This higher being meets him. Kylo Ren never gets redeemed in this version, which is different. Luke trains Rey in this one instead of Leia training Rey, as we saw in Rise of Skywalker. Actually, we didn't see it in Rise of Skywalker. We just were told that. Anyway, no, I don't want to put my tones into this. But there is a lot of story beats that were really different from what we were given.
Well, what I also thought was cool is that I saw that in this script, they said that like Kylo Ren in the First Order basically like cut off communication between planets.
Yes.
To really like help drive home that like loneliness and despair and like no one's there for you. So like the idea like the Resistance would have a harder time rising up because they can't get their message out. And so that the Resistance takes the fight to Coruscant in order to like stop this from happening and like overthrow the capital.
Yep.
Like,
so that's
a cool idea.
Right off the bat, we're at Coruscant, which is the planet that I think most of us were clamoring for.
Center of the galaxy. Yep.
Coruscant. Like, how do you not talk about? And in this script, it also talks about, the Senate and what kind of what is at Coruscant now, right?
Yeah.
Who is in charge and what does that look like? It's just very interesting, the differences. And if you like Rise of Skywalker, that's awesome. Stoked for you. This probably sounds cool to you too. This sounds probably cool to everybody, and I'm happy we got a movie at all. Obviously for me, this sounds superior in pretty much every way. The one thing that did remain the same is Lando's job, which was Lando was to go around the galaxy and get everybody rallied around him.
Right. And
that was the only thing, at least that I read from the leak. So very interesting that this leaked. This is that's all. I can't say too much here.
So
some of the
interesting things that Matt, I'll jump in, is that this script has some similarities to some of the things that were done in Rise of Skywalker. So kind of the relationship between Rey and Kylo Ren was still there. The Knights of Ren were still there, but they had a different role. Mm-hmm. The whole idea that like at the end of the movie, Force ghosts of like Luke, and Yoda and Obi-Wan were going to show up and like encourage Rey on, which we know from apparently a leak saying that JJ actually filmed like Mace Windu and Yoda and Luke all showing up and being there in that kind of spectral, Force ghost. And then they decided to kind of axe that and make it into these, voices thing. It's like certain elements, certain ideas were shared. So, which is interesting because if you look at the Rise of Skywalker, there are 4 people that are assigned screenwriter credits to it. J.J. Abrams, the guy that helped J.J. Abrams, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, and then Colin Trevorrow, and I think this Chris Donnelly or whatever his name is. And the reason for that is because some of the ideas, some of the dialogue for certain sections were kept and moved over, maybe transitioned a little bit, but still the ideas, some of the story beats were used. And if you look at this, I'd probably say like 90% of the Colin Trevorrow script was chucked out and only 10% was kept. But that 10% is like enough to keep a writing credit there. Yeah. So the real interesting thing is, let's say Rise of Skywalker were to win the Academy Award for Best Screenplay. I don't think that's going to happen. So I don't think we need to worry about that. But let's say that did happen.
Yeah.
Colin Trevorrow and Derek Connolly, they would also be winning Academy Awards for this, even though their script mainly was chucked in the bin.
Right.
Because it's still enough. I always find that portion of like how Hollywood and SAG and like the Writers Guild of America, the WGA, like how all that kind of works. Like if they would have completely chucked it out and not used any of that, they wouldn't have writing credits. But because there's still, some nuggets there, they get that. But I don't know, Matt. I'm okay. I think you said it perfectly. If you liked Rise of Skywalker, I think that's great, and we're happy for you. But I also think that this idea for Episode 9, Duel of the Fates, that Colin Trevorrow wrote, sounds like a really good idea. And I think me personally, I probably would have been happier with that treatment instead of what we got. But at the end of the day, it's not what we got. Disney's making money, and what we have is what we have, and that's just canon, and it is what it is now.
Yep.
So interesting. It's interesting to see these things. I mean, you always start getting the speculation, especially on projects when like some people have left and some people came in and finished halfway through. I mean, that's why the whole hashtag release the Snyder Cut is still a thing years later, because someone came in and finished up the project and made changes. And people want to see the original. So, like, I don't want to see that toxicity here with this, with people demanding to see the full script of Colin Trevorrow. But I think there's enough believability there to say that's probably what this was.
Is real. Yeah.
And you know what? Every single movie goes through these phases. A script gets written. They cut, like my favorite comedy of all time, Ghostbusters. What Dan Aykroyd originally wrote and what was ended up filmed and put on screen are two wildly different movies.
Yeah.
They share some same common themes. There's a few scenes that were pretty much the same, but wildly different for like 90% of that. But I love what happened, so there has to be an evolution. I get it. But we got to move on.
All good.
That's just what we get. We got to move on, Matt. That's all we have to do.
Let's move on until it comes out on Blu-ray.
Well, let's move on the podcast then, shall we? So, Matt, last week... you're done with Rebel Intelligence? Was that the last thing you had?
Yeah, that was the last one.
I just want to make sure I didn't cut you off. You had some secret Rebel Intelligence item.
I'm good.
So Matt, last week we talked about the idea of this like crossover media and the ability to like start a story in like one medium, like a video game, and then go to another. But then we kind of talked about this whole idea of like, do Star Wars movies and any media really, do you need to have a tie-over character, something that ties you back to the original content? And I think you and I both said we don't think so. If you use the world and use some of the familiar settings or maybe sounds, like there's ways to like evoke that. I don't think you necessarily need that, but we got a few answers. So we're going to get to those right now. And we're going to start over in the email like we always do, fortofnerd@gmail.com. And we've got Peter Christensen. He says, Dear Nerds, I'm excited for the weirdness of Phase 4 of the MCU, but I'm a little disappointed that Doctor Strange 2 won't be called Doctor Stranger. But Peter. That was pretty good. And bad all at the same time. I love it.
Oh, Peter.
I love it. Come on, I love
it's
that.
Great.
That's good. That's
Are you kidding me?
That's a perfect dad joke. He says, I'm fine with future Star Wars stories beginning with a video game or comic book, but I probably would not play or read it. There's way too much amazing new content these days and a growing universe of existing amazing content. I have to limit myself to TV and movies to keep from going insane. In addition to Rogue One as an existence proof of inserting new stories into a timeline, the MCU is a great example of quickly catching people up on the missed parts of a multi-part story. It is true. They do that well. He says, I think that it's not necessary for new Star Wars stories to include tie-ins to known characters. Star Wars has a rich and well-known language and culture, lightsabers, blaster sounds, ship designs, species, space travel and vistas, and technology levels. Examples, robots and space travel, but rudimentary computers. Not to mention the meta attributes for the audience like colors and musical themes. Just like you could easily tell apart the worlds of Willow versus The Princess Bride versus Conan the Destroyer, the holy trinity of my childhood. From any given 15-second clip, I feel you could do the same with Star Wars versus Star Trek versus Battlestar Galactica versus Firefly. But I do like the idea of a middle-aged Yoda with a salt and pepper comb-over in a briefcase. Cheers, Peter Christensen. I think Peter hits this right on the head, at least for me. The idea of like the world building, right? As he said, like blaster sounds, lightsabers, species, space travel, like musical motifs, some of all these things kind of go into it. Like The Mandalorian. What crossover character is in The Mandalorian?
We don't have one yet.
None. But see, they did smart things where this client, the child, is of the same species Yoda is.
Right.
So obviously we know that the internet has this affinity for calling it Baby Yoda because they don't know a name. And so they're making the association of Yoda. So to them, like, that's a big tie-in visually without actually having to like make it the character and tie into the lore and do those things. So I like all that. I like all of that, what Peter had to say.
I agree.
I think it works out
100%.
well. Let's go over to Facebook, facebook.com/FortofNerd. We've got Tim Paulin. He says, I think they can live on their own. Two characters I'd like to see more of are Mace Windu and Darth Maul. There's got to be some interesting backstories to tell. Now I'm going to tell you this right now.
We're not the end of Darth Maul. I know that.
Tim Paulin has not seen Rebels or the Clone Wars. And the last time I talked to him, I think he has started Star Wars Rebels. So, I'm not going to say things. I'm not going to give it away. I'm not going to spoil.
Right.
But I think that you're going to be happy with what some of these other series do with some of these characters. So.
And just speaking generally, whether you've seen some of these things or not, I still am not sure that we've seen the last of Darth Maul. I don't think that we have. That's what I think.
Okay, I think we have. I think it was pretty definitive.
I don't think we've seen. Well, I agree with you. It was definitive. Don't get me wrong.
Uh-huh.
I think there's a period of time where he exists that we will go back to.
I see.
At the end of Solo, we know that he is alive and that he's running this Red Circle or Red Dawn or whatever they're called. I think we visit them.
Okay, you and I need to talk about this off the podcast because I can't say anything because I think I will spoil stuff for Tim Paulin, who's watching Rebels right now.
Okay, well, I think in Kenobi we might hear some things. He's on Tatooine. Anyway.
Yep, well, let's talk later. Okay, staying on Facebook, Caleb Albers says, with the rumors or confirmation of a whole new trilogy starting off with a video game, I have to say I'm in disagreement with you guys over how well it would work. Does it sound cool on paper? Absolutely. But the plan's execution would be a hard road to travel. There are so many things that you would have to tie into the movie and leave out of the game. Ticket sales are going to be affected because what if some people want to wait to finish the game before seeing the movie? What if they don't play the game altogether and are lost by all the references made into the video game? Or the reverse. How are you going to explain the characters or story enough for the people that don't play the games, but not explain so much as to bore the ones that did? Yeah. The number of pros and cons of this process is fairly equal, but the cons have significantly more weight behind them. I don't see how a system like that would work in Disney's favor. I feel like they'd end up losing more money in the long run. And even if they did shorts or an animated thing to act as a buffer for those who didn't play the game, that's a lot of money to spend on something not a lot of people would watch. The risk and rewards do not line up there. Not in a way that's worth it. You don't go all in with a pair of twos. So, Caleb.
I go in with a pair of twos.
Well, that's crazy talk.
I also don't know the rules of the game.
Well, there you go. That's a bad idea.
I agree with what's being said, and we mentioned these things on the podcast.
Yeah, we actually talked about that. Yeah,
almost all those things that were mentioned, we mentioned as well. It was like there are a lot of hurdles that you would have to do because I'm going to play the game, and I don't want to sit through a half hour of a movie and be bored because I already know this crap.
Right.
And so, yeah, the game, I think we mentioned this, it has to be different enough. It has to be an introduction to the area, or it just enriches the experience, not an essential part of it.
We did agree that we think that the execution of this could be the tough sell. And all the things you stated, Caleb, I think we're in agreement with you because I think we kind of talked about this. But here's the thing I want to go back to. What if Rogue One was a video game?
Yeah.
Rogue One ties in perfectly, absolutely perfectly to Episode 4, A New Hope. However, none of those characters carry over into that. What happens in that whole movie is also explained in the crawl of Episode 4. So, if you were just to take this back and say, what if Rogue One was a video game and you played this and you experienced this for a 15, 20-hour video game, and then the movie comes out, and in the crawl it gives you, Rebels have won their first victory, securing the plans to the Death Star, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. If you played the video game, you're like, oh man, I just played that and all this rich, cool stuff that happened. But the story can still pick up. And as a movie, the movie still works on its own without having to be well, let me tell you who Jyn Erso is. It doesn't matter. She was one of the rebels that they just named that helped secure the plans for the Death Star.
Yes.
We got it. Now we're moving on. So I think in terms like that could work if they do it like that. But if it's let's say Jedi Fallen Order and we get Cal Kestis, and this is canon, but we get this character of Cal Kestis and you play as Cal Kestis through a 15, 20-hour video game, and then they want to go and do a movie where Cal Kestis is going to be a main character, then now we have all sorts of problems. Yes. We know his whole background. We know all these other things. That's the tricky road to hoe.
Yep. Agreed.
But going on, Caleb says, as for character crossovers, I feel like you don't have to have a tie-in to past stories for things to be interesting or successful in Star Wars. But it does help. If people know that they're going to see a character they are familiar with in a setting that they aren't, that's more exciting than getting feelings built up upon a brand of new characters altogether. I think now it would be smart for Disney to distance themselves from the Skywalkers in any way they can. And from the sound of it, that's what they're doing. And Yoda is the perfect way to do that separation. Eventually, I think they can even get off of Yoda and move completely to a story about brand new people. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, I think they've done in The Mandalorian. But it's
a familiar time in The Mandalorian, though.
Right.
The Empire is there, and I think we're going to get brand new everything. Except I think we're going to see Yoda. I think that's what's going to happen here with this. I don't know.
Is Yoda a main character or is he a side character?
Honestly, like I said, if you're going to do this, Yoda almost has to be, I don't know if a main character, an important character.
Look at his role in Empire.
Character.
Look at his role in Empire.
Yeah.
Is he a main character? I mean, he's on screen for the equivalent of maybe like 10 minutes.
Right.
15 minutes. But he plays an important role to the story and to the narrative. And so I think something like that would work. But if it's, all Yoda all the time, I think that's a bad idea.
Right. I agree.
You need to get somewhere else. Anyway, let's go over to Twitter at Fort of Nerd. We've got some responses there. Rich Turpin says, no, I think the less ties, the better for the new Star Wars movies/TV. So far, this is what has made The Mandalorian successful. We need new Star Wars, not ties to the old, tired Skywalker stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I agree. But it does hurt my heart just a little bit to people say, like, I'm tired of the Skywalkers, the old Skywalkers. I was like, no, come on. Don't do Luke like that. I miss Luke. Anyway. The original
it's over, man.
The original trilogy, man, in my heart. It's never over.
Everything's over.
Never. Okay. Paul Calico says, Paul Calico at pcalico84 says, Star Wars stories can definitely stand on their own. Sadly, the only example we have is Mando, because everything else heavily ties in. I'd really like to see Darth Bane's story told either in a show or in the movies. That way it has nothing to do with our main characters, but still lays down some heavy lore, the rule of two. Or a Top Gun-style Rogue Squadron.
That's what I thought Rogue One was going to be when it first was announced. I think we all kind of thought it was going to be like a high-flying, like, action space shooter.
So did I. Now here's the thing. A Top Gun-style Rogue Squadron. If they were to do something like that, then it's like, okay, are we telling a story back with the original kind of Rogue Squadron era? Yeah. So, like, that's the thing, like, then you're
back to the Skywalker saga, though.
But if you go back to like the old extended universe, the what's considered Legends now, the non-canon stuff, there was books about Rogue Squadron that followed Wedge Antilles and his group of fighter pilots, and they had cool stories all on their own. So, like, could you do something like that? Yes. I think, though, you would have to put that in some sort of setting that is familiar to people, so it's either original trilogy setting or it's Poe Dameron Resistance setting, maybe prior to the events of The Force Awakens.
Right. I agree with that. I think the feeling I get is this era is done.
Yeah, I think so too.
That's what I think, that they are leaving this period of time, regardless of where you are in the galaxy, from J.R.R. to the Reylo kiss, like, it's over. We're not getting anything else.
I would be,
for
though,
a period of time after Kenobi.
I tell you, I would be excited to see some sort of like fighter pilot, group, story. Ah, gosh, that could be so good. That could be so good. Plus, space battles are amazing.
I agree.
Robert Pollard at Robert Pollard02 says, the more continuity, the better. The reason why people love the Marvel Universe is how intertwined the stories and characters are. Same with Star Wars. You don't have to rely on the same characters, but it's good to have them in your back pocket just in case. So he's on the other side of this. Robert is.
Well, I don't think that I think that he's right. That's why we like Marvel. But Star Wars isn't Marvel, and I just don't know that I see that working really well for Star Wars. Particularly with the Skywalker saga. Skywalker saga, it's old. Okay, it's old and we're leaving it behind. I think with this new brand of films and this new era, we could see more of what he's talking about here, of those characters intertwining. But I think we're done. I think that's over.
Yeah.
I think it's new time, which is why we're getting voices like Taika Waititi, potentially like Kevin Feige and
Rian Johnson.
Even Rian Johnson, guys who weren't really involved. They're creatives, right? They're not. I mean, you don't make, Thor a tonal shift like that if you're not a complete crazy creative awesome director.
Yeah.
You don't make Looper if you're not insane and you have this crazy idea, right? You don't make these movies. So I think we're completely done. We're out. Other than maybe a Yoda tie-in, if that's the era we're going to. But other than that, I think we're out. Say goodbye.
John and Kevin at Big Stupid Podcast says, I can live without them, but it's always so much fun when they connect to previous stories. So I think there's a lot of that kind of idea, like time to move on, let's see new stuff. But if we see a character here and there that drops in, if it's within a reasonable time frame, like I'm kind of okay with that. A little nod to like, this is still the Star Wars universe. We know some of them. I think on the whole, that's not a bad thing, but I personally like the idea of pulling away a little bit and come on, it's a whole galaxy. There's got to be all sorts of very interesting characters. I mean, you've got if we go back in time, you've got Jedi, you've got Sith, you've got cartels, you've got crime bosses and the underworld, you've got bounty hunters, you've got the political machinations, you've got trade federation. I mean, maybe I invoked the wrong thing saying trade federations, but there's like so many different things and nobility and different planets and there's a lot of stuff you could pull from to make some really cool things.
No, you can't. Kathleen Kennedy says they're having a hard time because there's nothing they can do.
Yeah, come on. Let's not go back there. I'm pushing forward. I think it's great. Let's move on. New stories. Matt, we love listening to the Super Friends, and the Super Friends always pull through and help us out week to week. But we need some help this week.
We always need help from the Super Friends. And this week was great with all the interactions. Thanks for all the responses. We got a ton of them this week. We struck a nerve. They were interested. As always, Super Friends, thank you for listening. Find us on all of the ways that you listen. Leave a review. Continue to interact with us. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and get the question of the week. And as you can see, we read basically every single response that y'all give us. So if you drop a note, you'll get a shout out. That's what I'm going to say this week. Nothing crazy or weird. I just genuinely thank you and please interact. And if you're feeling kind, leave us a review, like, subscribe.
Awesome. Perfect. That's what we need.
Yeah.
Matt, this week, there was some sad news that we didn't talk about right up at the top. It's an ending of an era. And for me, this is really, really sad because of the things that are involved that are around this. So, Christopher Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien's third child, his son Christopher, died at the age of 95 years old.
That's old.
That's definitely old. A lot of people may wonder, like, why that's important, why that's newsworthy. I mean, J.R.R. Tolkien passed away in 1973. So, why is this important? Well, the reason why this is important is that Christopher Tolkien probably is just as important in the Tolkien universe of Middle-earth as J.R.R. Tolkien, but in a different way. So, obviously, J.R.R. Tolkien is the author of The Hobbit, the author of The Lord of the Rings, which is the 3 books, Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, and Return of the King. He also wrote some small things, like he translated and wrote Beowulf. And he also wrote like the story of is it Farmer Ham? I think it's Farmer Ham. Farmer Ham Giles. Anyway, but he wrote what would consider to be some of the best fantasy genre, and then the high fantasy genre that kind of became the high watermark for all of that.
Right.
And everyone kind of compares themselves to that. So what's interesting is that I want to talk a little bit about the history here, and then I want to ask you some questions. We can kind of talk about this. And then this will kind of get back to why Christopher Tolkien's really important. So in 1937? In 1937, in September of 37, was when The Hobbit was first published. And The Hobbit was a book that was written for J.R.R. Tolkien's kids, including Christopher. He grew up reading a bunch of books when he lived in England about fairies and these adventures, and so he wrote The Hobbit to basically be a children's tale, but it was supposed to be children's fiction, not necessarily fantasy, even though it is fantasy. And then, of course, The Lord of the Rings kind of becomes like the high fantasy. But he wrote this to be a kid's book. It has a story of, a main character that's concerned about things like, food and, his home and things like this. And he ends up going on this grand adventure to, win back treasure from a dragon. And he falls in with a group of dwarves and a wizard that he gets swept away on this huge thing and has all these big adventures. But each chapter is like a little small adventure, which is really, if you look at it, how a lot of children's books are organized, right? So he writes this. It's published in 1937. His publishers loved it. Matter of fact, his publisher got it, and before he decided to publish the book, he took it to his son and let his son read it, and his son just loved it and raved about it. And then that's what convinced the publisher to go ahead and publish this book. So he writes this book. The publisher now wants more. Because this was a kid's story, he wants something else. So he asks Professor Tolkien to write more. And he starts writing The Lord of the Rings between 1937 and 1949. And then after editing and whatnot, it actually was released in 1954. Its original kind of push from the 3 books coming out was from 1954 of July to October of 1955. So almost 20 years after the publication of The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings comes out. And of course, The Lord of the Rings is much darker, right? It's, we pick up the thread of where Bilbo finds this magic ring in this cave and Gollum, and then we find out it's actually the one ring of power that was created by this Dark Lord Sauron in an earlier age, that he can control all the rings of power and can basically, take over the entire world of Middle-earth. And then we get 4 hobbits that are going to get swept out on this grand adventure to try to destroy this ring and get rid of it and stop Sauron from returning and rising to power again. It's 3 books. It's amazing. It's high fantasy. It's wonderful. But Professor Tolkien wrote these books. He wrote the languages of them. He wrote the poetry that's in them. He wrote some of the prose and some of the music stuff that's in it. But he always intended for his work of Lord of the Rings to be a 2-volume set. Instead of this 1-volume set that got broken into 3 books, he wanted it to be a 2-volume set, the other being the Silmarillion. And the Silmarillion was basically going to be a collection of stories and histories of this grand world that he'd started writing in The Hobbit and then continued on in Lord of the Rings. But the publisher said, no, let's do this, as 3 volumes, Fellowship, Two Towers, Return, and we'll put this out there. So, here's where we get into this. Tolkien continues to write. He dies in 1973. At this point, Christopher Tolkien, who is an author himself, one of his dad's biggest critics and kind of confidants in the writing process, who basically heard this story of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings as they were being written. In the case of The Lord of the Rings over a few years, or Hobbit over a few years, and over The Lord of the Rings over a 15 to 17 year period, he's part of this. He's the kind of test subject, so to speak. And Christopher Tolkien, after his dad died, was named the executor of his literary work. He was the person that took all of his dad's manuscripts and pages and rewrites and compiled them into the Silmarillion and published his dad's work posthumously. Then also published, and that was, the Silmarillion came out, I want to say 1977. And then in 1980, he published The Unfinished Tales. And then he published in 83 to 96 a volume of 12 books called The History of Middle-earth. And then eventually The Children of Huron, Berian and Luthiel, which just came out in 2017. So literally up into his mid-90s, Christopher Tolkien was still the executor, was still taking his father's work and editing that and putting it out into the world. What, they call the Legendarium. This big grand work of his father, all this history, all this backstory, which some of that stuff went into some of the movies. Some of the ideas, at least. So, now that the history lesson's over, we lost Christopher Tolkien. Christopher Tolkien was extremely important because he was the editor of a lot of his dad's work, and we got more than just The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. We got such a vast array of greater depth to Middle-earth because of Christopher Tolkien's tireless work and protection of his dad's legacy. Because a lot of people wanted to use, Professor Tolkien's Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and all sorts of other stuff. But Christopher Tolkien always had to be kind of the one to sign off on this. So, with that, I think it would be appropriate that we talk about some of the things that we love about Middle-earth and we love about Professor Tolkien and Christopher Tolkien's work in this realm. So, Matt, you and I talked, and you said that you've only seen the movies. Correct?
I read The Hobbit,
okay,
and I read Fellowship.
Okay. So you've done a little bit of the reading then as well. That's awesome.
It's been a while, but yes.
How old were you when you were first introduced to any of this stuff?
Oh man, I had this kid in my class who wouldn't shut up about Legolas when I was probably in middle school. Would not shut up about Legolas. Red-haired Patrick Temporelli. If you're listening, Patrick, I still remember you freaking talking about Legolas, and I was like, that guy sounds cool. Not Patrick.
Right.
Legolas.
Yeah.
That was the first time I remember being introduced to anything Lord of the Rings, and it was probably 5th grade, maybe 6th grade. Was the first time that I'd been introduced to any of that. I mean, I'd heard of Lord of the Rings.
Right.
But I just, as a kid, I was absorbed in sports. I mean, that's really the only thing I cared about was sports. I didn't care about reading. I don't even remember any books.
So,
certainly.
When I was maybe 7 or 8, so maybe second-ish grade, because I'm trying to think, Charlie just turned 7 and he's in 1st grade. So yeah, 7 or 8, maybe around 2nd grade somewhere, we visited my cousins down in Indiana. And I remember this so vividly. We were sitting downstairs at my Aunt Sandy's house, and my cousin Greg is 8 years older than me, and my cousin Brian is 10 years older than me. And so I'm 8 at the time. Greg is 16, Brian's 18, but I remember the three of us, maybe my brother Josh was there too. I don't remember that, but I remember the three of us for sure. We watched on their TV the the animated 1977 Rankin and Bass Hobbit cartoon. And I had never seen it before. And I remember it was this Hobbit character, and he was trying to get gold, and there was dwarfs, and there was singing, and I just fell in love with it. Like, I just fell in love with that story. And I always wanted more, but I always thought, like, oh, this was just kind of it. And to this day, I still love that. And it's nostalgia. I know, like, if you go watch the Rankin and Bass 77 Hobbit.
It's rough, man.
It's rough. The music in it, to me, is so touching and great. But it's, like, literally, like, folk music. But I think it's beautiful. And I'm super nostalgic here. I understand I'm looking at it with rose-colored glasses. But there was that. And I remember talking to my dad about it. And he said, oh, yeah, I've read all those books. And you'll really enjoy it. And I went, wait, what books? And it wasn't until maybe I was in 6th grade when I had an opportunity to read, I don't know, there was a list of books and you had to pick a book to read it. And I saw that The Hobbit was a book that was on the reading list.
Yeah.
And I remember getting super excited because I'd seen the cartoon and I loved that. And so I remember in 6th grade reading The Hobbit and just loving it to death. And like, I tore into that. But it probably wasn't high school, like my freshman year, 9th grade, when I really got into like The Lord of the Rings and read Fellowship and Two Towers and Return of the King, right. And then read it again, and then read it again. I think I read it like 4 or 5 times during my high school years, just because I loved the story. And I think for me, one of the biggest things is I think Professor Tolkien has just a way of like telling a good story, having morals be a part of it, the idea of like, doing good for the right reasons, like doing good for good reasons and helping people out of a jam. And, oh gosh, just like the idea of kind of self-reliance. Cause like, look at Bilbo, look at Frodo, like they're not really go-getters, but by the end of their journeys, they, become much more grown up and mature and self-assured and strong mentally and like morally. So then we get the movies, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, then we get the movies in the early 2000s, and I've blabbed a lot, but like, why do you think the movies did so well? Like, why do you think those resonated?
I think we did a movie club about Fellowship 3-4 months ago or something like that. And we talked a lot about what made that movie in particular great. But here's the thing about Tolkien that I know from the books that I did read is attention to detail on the setting. Yep. You know exactly what you're looking at. You know exactly where you are. And you can see everything that is being described to you. And so Peter Jackson, pretty faithful, looking, and there is such a specific visual feeling to Middle-earth and such a specific feeling to the Shire. The Shire looked like I imagined the Shire would look. Right. Without knowing that that's what I imagined the Shire would look like. If that, I mean, it just felt warm, inviting, which is how I felt when I read The Hobbit. Because I did not read a lot of the books I was assigned to read in school. I cliff noted or spark noted pretty much every book. However, just like you, on a list in my freshman year was The Hobbit, and I thought, I'm going to actually try this whole like reading a book thing. And I loved it. Loved it. And so for me, that is where my Lord of the Rings love comes from, is from reading The Hobbit as sort of the introduction and the prequel to what the Lord of the Rings would become. And when I got to see Bilbo and got to see these things that I'd read about that were maybe not as important to me as they were to you or to somebody else. For me, I just didn't read a lot of books, so I didn't really care about a lot of characters in my life rather than what I saw on the screen. But this was the first time I'd seen something in a while that was represented on screen that I'd read. And it was really cool. And I think that that's part of what made the Lord of the Rings movies so successful was everyone had heard about it. A lot of people had read it, but we didn't really ever get to see Middle Earth as Professor Tolkien, as you call him, had laid it out. So descriptive, so detailed, so nuanced. But I also think about what you said earlier. Part of why I enjoy Lord of the Rings is I get from it something spiritual, almost religious. Not almost religious. For me, it is religious.
Right.
Where I see God, I see evil, I see darkness, I see failure, I see sickness, I see mental problem. I see all of these afflictions that we deal with in life, and I see it happen throughout a course of 3 films, and I see good and evil, and I see evil win, and then I see good win. And it's just, I think that's what makes the series so great is it's at the core of who we are as a people. There's always going to be good versus bad, but this goes a step beyond that of just good versus bad. It evokes something that's hard to describe, something emotional, something that you just feel inside you that pulls. It's difficult to describe. You feel something that is unique that most movies do not.
Mm-hmm.
Something, in the core. I mean, that's the thing you say. It's like it's in your soul. And he described what we all feel in our soul, that we want to be Frodo. We want to be Bilbo. We want to have these adventures and do good for just doing good. Anyway, and it was beautifully told. And these heroes are all flawed. There's not one that's not.
Right. Yep.
Every single one of them is flawed. There are problems. And they all need help. And it's tearful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in many moments in the movies and the books where you just you feel it. And you know who the Sam is in your life, right? Yep. And you know who the Frodo is in your group of friends or in your family, and you know who you are. And sometimes those roles interchange, but you need everyone to do something greater than what you can do by yourself. I could go on and on about the themes, but I think the themes is what I'm trying to get at. The themes, that's what propels this to greatness.
And the interesting thing, too, I think, with Professor Tolkien's work, and I do call him Professor Tolkien because he was a professor at Oxford and a couple other places, so truly. What I think is interesting is, like, his life experiences really went into his work. So, like, he became an orphan. Like, his dad died and then his mother died. And his custodianship was given, him and his brother were given to, like, this Catholic priest who then tried to, like, place these boys in a home in England, in Birmingham. And so, like, when you see that, like, Bilbo's kind of an orphan at the beginning. Like, his parents have passed on, and he doesn't have, a lot of family. He's got, like, relatives, but, like, they're not, like, there, right? Professor Tolkien fought in World War I, fought in the trenches in World War I. And World War I was when the world saw the machinations of war transform from, the whole, march and stand 10 paces away from each other, shoot when you see the white of their eyes, to things like tanks and flamethrowers and, like, the Industrial Revolution of the war machine. And, like, you see this in, like, the writing when you realize that the forests around Isengard are torn down, and instead of trees and beautiful things, machines of war and the industrialization is taking place. And, like, you see that. It's like there's these things that, like, came from him. And, like, you talked about, like, the religious aspect. Like, he grew up Catholic, and so he had that kind of background. So, like, he was very aware of things. And so the idea of writing light and dark, good and evil, really, really were easy, I think, for him to latch onto those ideas. And obviously those ideas were very common themes in a lot of literature prior to his time as well. So there's all kind of that. The interesting thing about Christopher Tolkien's work here, right? So we'll talk about the Silmarillion for a second. Like, the Silmarillion is this really interesting book, and I know a lot of people who have read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, but then they always kind of say, like, the Silmarillion's different. Well, the Silmarillion is a collection of kind of stories, background, histories, appendices, basically, that Christopher Tolkien helped pull together after his dad died. But his dad was trying to find a way to put this together, and it's kind of broken up into a number of parts. It's like 5 parts. Like, the first part basically kind of talks about, like, the creation of, like, the world and, like, what that was. The second part gives a description of basically the Valar and the Maiar, which are basically kind of like the superpowers. It's kind of like gods and angels, and like how they're able to create things like the wizards and, you know, give people power, stuff like that. The third part's the Quintus Silmarillion, which is like kind of the main part of the Silmarillion, and it's basically like the history and events before and during the First Age, and including the wars over the Silmarils, which kind of gives it its title. But like, we get to know like Morgoth and some of these, like, the big bad of the First Age, right? And how that kind of gives way in like the fourth part of the book, which is basically like the downfall of Numenor and the people and all that taking place in the Second Age. And like, we know, like, right at the end of the Second Age is when Sauron and the ring gets cut, and, you know, boom, the starting of the Third Age, right? And we kind of see a little brief part of that in the movies, and in the books you get a little bit of that history, right? Elendil and all of that. But what's interesting about that, like, is we get the stories of the First Age and the Second Age, and I think right now, going back and reading the Silmarillion, especially that whole part that talks about the downfall of Numenor, is probably a great idea if you're a Lord of the Rings fan and you're going to watch that Amazon Prime series, because we know, according to some maps that have been leaked, Numenor is on those maps. We're going to see the people of Numenor. These are the people that are kind of the forerunners that Aragorn's descended from. There could be some big things that come into play from there into this. And then, of course, the final part is kind of about the Rings of Power in the Third Age, and kind of a brief account of like some of the things that kind of just like led up to what we are presented in the books. And so that's kind of what the Silmarillion is. Like, it's this gathering of a lot of history, a lot of things that you would want to kind of go over. And then, of course, like unfinished tales, and the tale of Beren and Luthiel, you know, this elven princess basically that falls in love with a mortal man and gives up her immortality to be with him. Like, in the movies, in the book, they refer to Aragorn and Arwen as Beren and Luthiel, like reborn, basically. Like that whole kind of concept, that whole notion. Well, there's a story that was kind of, you know, pulled together by Christopher Tolkien that was based on this, that his dad wrote a lot of, and things like that. So, anyway, to me, I'm sad. I'm really sad, because with Christopher Tolkien's passing, the last thing we got was Beren and Luthiel, and that was a standalone book in 2017. 2 years ago. I mean, well, 3 years ago now. I guess we're 2020. 3 years ago was the last time we had any last published work that started with Professor Tolkien and in this whole world of Middle-earth. And most likely, that's the last we're going to get.
Yep.
And for me, I'm a little sad. However, like, we do know that we're going to get other stuff, right? We're going to get the Amazon Prime series. Yeah, more content.
Yeah.
But we're not going to get anything new coming from the Tolkien
Official
estate.
From the family line.
Yep.
Yep, it is sad.
And so for me, that's a little sad. So
sad but amazing that it's been that long. I mean,
it's
that his
80
son
years.
was so interested and integral into his work that he was able to carry that legacy for so long.
Yep.
I mean, that doesn't happen often. You don't hear about that, at least in in the mainstream on something as big of a property as Middle Earth.
And the funny thing is, Matt, too, about Christopher Tolkien is because his dad said he was like my chief critic and collaborator.
Yeah. And
Christopher Tolkien took his dad's legacy and protecting it so seriously. The family allowed the rights to the movies that kind of been out there, and then, the Peter Jackson trilogy, which I love.
Yes.
I love, and I know they've made tons of money and well received. Do you want to hear what Christopher Tolkien had to say about the movie?
What?
In 2012, he was interviewed for Le Monde, and he criticized the films. He says they gutted the book, making an action film for 15 to 25-year-olds. He was not very happy. Eventually, he commenced legal proceedings against New Line Cinema, claiming that his family was owed over 80 million pounds. So I don't know what that is translated to US, maybe like $95 million. And that was in 2008. In 2009, he reached a deal with New Line for an undisclosed amount, and then he withdrew his legal objection to The Hobbit. And that's why we got the Hobbit films, because if he had not, that could have been tied up in legal proceedings for considerably more time.
I've got a legal objection to The Hobbit.
So, anyway, I think that it's, I don't know, I'm just sad. Like, that's what it comes down to. I'm just sad. I love this. Yeah, this is stuff that, like, affected me as a child, affected me in my teenage years, affected me in my adult. Like, I really do feel like, and I know I'm not as old as some people who remember when the Lord of the Rings books came out. They remember when, like, in the late 60s, early 70s, Frodo Lives was being spray painted on subways in New York City, and there was this, like, the whole, like, counterculture movement of, like, the 60s and late 60s, like, that really gained a lot of popularity to Lord of the Rings. Like, it was being picked up. Like, I remember my dad talking about reading it when he was, around that age, like around the age of, 10, 12, 13, about when kind of I got into it. So I know that there's been people that have loved it for much, much longer than me. But for me, it's been literally part of my whole life in different ways and at different stages. And so I feel sad. I feel like there's something that's just not going to be the same going forward.
Yeah.
So here's what I think we should do as a podcast. One, I think we definitely need to have another movie club. And I definitely think we need to follow up with Fellowship of the Ring, and we need to do a Two Towers at some point.
Well, it's great. I just watched it. Literally. I mean, last week's challenge, or 2 weeks ago, it was to go watch Lord of the Rings because you won't regret it.
Right. That's true.
You won't. I never regret it.
Never. So I think we should do that. But two, I want to say to the Super Friends, like, if you haven't read any of Professor Tolkien's work, try it. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. And if you have a hard time with reading, just go back and watch the movies. Like, that's still good. Like, you're not, you're gonna be fine there. But go and read The Hobbit. Go and read The Lord of the Rings. And heaven help you. Please do this if you can. Read the Silmarillion before that Amazon Prime series comes up, because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. You'll have greater appreciation and depth, and you'll see things they do, and you'll feel like you're on the inside. And I think that's always a great feeling when one of these big shows come out, to feel like you're already on the inside. You know things, and your friends will turn to you and say, "Hey, didn't you read this? What should I know?" And then you get to, like, have these nerdy, geeky, wonderful conversations.
Yep.
So that's my thing. I think we should, in memory of Christopher Tolkien's passing, I think we should consume some of the legendarium, some of the Tolkien work this week. I don't even have a question. I'm not even going to throw a question out there. I think that's just what it is. So I guess what we'll do, since we're not going to ask you a question, is we're going to ask for you to give us a question, and we'll answer your questions next week. I think that's fair. Don't you, Matt?
Let's do it.
All right. Let's do it that way. All right, Super Friends. Unfortunately, this is the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with us week after week. And from all of us here at the Fortress of Nerditude to all of you out there, wherever you may be, may the Force be with you, always.